along the same lines as what I was mentioning with regard to our member minute. It is it's really remarkable the talent, the knowledge, the just a wide array of history and perspectives that many of our club members can bring to our club, and therefore to our enjoyment. And on relatively short notice, we were able to get an excellent speaker today who happens to be one of our own. And so I'd like to introduce Bill Bolen. And so today we have the very special program, a very special program, as one of our own is going to show us how he sustained a musical career as a performer and band leader over a half a century, and how music and life changed during that time. Bill Bolen's from Charlotte. He came to UNC in the class of 67, studying history, music, and religion. And Bill went on to earn a divinity degree at Duke in 1970. He then went to Indiana University to study music and came back here to get a master's degree in music education in 1974 from University of North Carolina. Bill started playing music as a performer with bands in 1958 when he was still in school at Myers Park in Charlotte, and as a drummer. And because he had been playing piano since he was 7 or 8 years old, he became the band's pianist, and that role is one he's occupied and he's played with his bands throughout his career. Although he considers himself retired, he's still the band leader of choice and by demand at the debutante ball, which he does every year. We've asked Bill to talk about his music and his experiences, including how popular music has changed during the decades when he performed. We may even get to hear a little bit of it if we're lucky. So, Bill, thanks for agreeing to do this for us today. We're so glad that you're with us. Please take it away.
Can't hear you, Bill.
Bill, I think you're muted.
No.
Can you hear me now?
We got you now. Yes, sir.
Okay. Will.
Yeah, you're good to go.
Perfect.
How about all right, I need to be on the other. So I have my iPhone here too. So sorry about that. Well, first I want to thank, I'm going to look into this one and you can see me from that Howard's point.
Perfect.
Okay. What can I say? Jim called on Monday and said, guess what? We need a program, and what we learned from Bill Ellis when we started the Rotary Club is you don't say no. So here I am. So half of this, or part of it will kind of be a member minute, a little bit about me, and thanks, Gavin, for what you said already. Did grow up in Charlotte, was fortunate to have a good musical background, wonderful teachers, and whatever reason started playing in bands in junior high school. I was a drummer first. People ask me sometimes, how did you get to do that, or how do you become a musician like that? And it's hard to explain because I always loved music, always loved drums and listened to march music. And my aunt got me a drum, and I just, 6 or 7 years old, started playing with it. And parents got me lessons, and from then on, it went on from there. I did play timpani for a while. I was an orchestral musician, and even considered doing that. That's why I was in Indiana. What I did in junior high school was played in different bands. The first band we talk about was a band in a little town called Mount Holly, North Carolina, near Gastonia. And that band was playing, this was 1958, so it was what we'd call rockabilly and rock and roll, that kind of thing. I think it might help right now if I could explain to you a little bit about that kind of music and how to understand it. People ask me sometimes, how do you play all these different songs? How do you know how to play all these styles and all this kind of thing? And the fact is that most popular music, particularly rock and roll, is not really all that difficult. So when I was taking piano lessons, Well, the type of music I really enjoyed from the beginning because of the rhythm was boogie woogie. And boogie woogie really gives you the basis for so much of rock and roll. Now, I'm going to play a little boogie woogie for you right now, and then I'm going to show you some different styles of boogie woogie and show you how it relates to rock and roll and pop music. So the first boogie woogies I learned were kind of like this. What you can hear from that is the rhythm is the most important thing, and that starts off with kind of a shuffle beat. First thing that shows you is the most important thing about the music is the rhythm here. What makes that move? If I just kind of boring, but once I add triplets, this feeling makes the music jump a little bit. All of boogie woogie is based on what we call a 12-bar or 8-bar blues, a pattern that's used throughout rock and roll music, and that you play. I'll play the pattern for you. You can get some idea. You play 4 bars of what we call the 1 chord, 2 bars of the 4 chord, back to the 1 chord, 5 chord, then 1 chord. So it ends up being like this. Okay, so that was 12 bars of a boogie woogie. Now, boogie has all these different kind of patterns you can use with it. I use this one, and that was in what we would call triple time, using triplets to figure out 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or triplet, triplet. All music is based on either the triple field or the duple field. It's almost like when you march, you feel 1, 2, 1, 2. When you skip along, you're like da 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 da. So you get the feeling of 2 or 3. Same with boogie. This is a triple field. Straight 8th note field would be. Okay, now how does that apply to the type of music I learned when playing in rock and roll bands? Well, if we were going to do a song like Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry, that is just the same thing as Boogie Woogie. Straight 8th notes, 1 to and Johnny Be Good, any number of rock and roll songs that had that feeling to it come from Boogie Woogie, essentially the 12-bar blues form that I was just mentioning. I don't want to get off too far on that, but it's just that was kind of the basis of making this music very simple and easy for me once I listened to it and knew the form of it. The rest of it was pretty simple. The other is a song that we all learned growing up back in the 50s and 60s. I remember everybody had a piano in their home, and most people learned how to play the piano. So all of you remember Heart and Soul. Raise your hands how many play Heart and Soul in your life. Of course, all of you have. Well, so much of the music of the 50s and 60s is based on that. The doo-wop music, was on the Heart and Soul changes, which is the 1 chord, 6, 4, 5. So I learned how to play that, and then I would learn how to play it in every key. So the time I got into a band that we had in junior high school, I could already play so many of the songs that were popular back then, like that's heart and soul. But remember the let me think. Or so many of the doo-wop songs that our band played were based off of the same thing. So that gave me the basis for a lot of the songs that I played then and I would learn later. Songs like this. Now, when most people hear that, they automatically can associate it with the song that they remember called Stand By Me, which is based on the same changes. I'm just being honest with you, it's so weird to try to do this on Zoom without being able to see you or get any kind of response.
You're doing great.
Okay. Any kind of feedback like this helps me because I just feel like I'm.
No, this is awesome. You're doing great.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I needed that. The first band I played with, I was the drummer, like I said, and my next door neighbor heard me playing over there and I could play rock and roll beats. But rock and roll drums is essentially the same thing. You either play in Kansas City, I come the bass drum, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, pretty simple. Or you play straight eighth notes like we said, good golly, Miss Polly. Bass drum, the beat is just straight 4, 4, 4. Now, what started happening was that you start messing around with that beat. I could play it. There was a song called Susie Q by Ronnie Hawkins. And none of the country drummers could play the syncopated beat like that, but I could play it on the count. So I played that, and the guys said, wow. Or Bo Diddley, who was a really famous New Orleans or Mississippi blues man. He did a song called Bo Diddley, and he you can do a drum solo off of that. So on the piano, you did it on the guitar, of course. So when I could play that kind of music, the guy said, great. So I went to the drummer. I think about it now, why my parents ever let me do that, I don't know. You go with a bunch of guys who are 13 or 14 years old, and you stay up and play, get home at midnight or 1 o'clock. You know, today it'd be unimaginable, but this is in the 50s. Yeah, I think things were safer then. Or my parents just let me do it. And so the same thing happened. It finally got to that band was just too much. And so in junior high school, we put together a great group called the Rivieras that eventually played for different kind of parties all over North South Carolina, some in Georgia. We played for juniors, seniors. We played for fraternity parties up in Carolina, some, believe it or not. We played for just about every kind of dances you can think of. And that was when I was probably from 15 to 16, 17 years old. I actually played right after I got my license. It's hard to believe my parents let us do this too, but we played for a junior, senior. I want to say it was in Rockingham. I'm 16 years old. My parents let me drive, and one other fellow's parents let them drive. So we drove to Rockingham, North Carolina, set up, played for the junior, senior, got in our cars, drove to Chapel Hill, sleep at the Beta House or the SAE House, arriving there like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And you could drive back then, you could drive from Rockingham to Chapel Hill, through Pinehurst would be now. In the middle of the night, you probably wouldn't pass 10 people on the road that late at night. Still, it was insane that I could do that at 16, but it was a different time. have to say that when we started this band, probably the biggest influence we had, and the people we tried to copy were the black bands in Charlotte area. There was this venue we used to play in called Park Center, where they would bring big acts in. And when we first started going there, we were like 14, 15 years old, to see these different bands, particularly black bands, like James Brown, the Delacardos, or a group from Charlotte we really liked. And of course, our favorite one was a guy named Maurice Williams, who had a very famous song that became a #1 hit back in I think it was 1957 or 58, called Little Darling. And Maurice was actually from, I think, Lancaster, a little town of Lancaster, South Carolina. Anyway, you might all know this song. It's called It's the wrong key. A little darling, a little darling. Anyway, Maurice Williams had this super band. At that time, they were called the Gladiolas. Changed their names to the Zodiacs. It's Maurice Williams and the Zodiacs. And we flipped over there. He had another big song called Stay, Stay. Chapel Hill, if you know any from the 60s or 50s or 60s, both these songs were covered by other people and became well-known hits. Let's see, Little Darling was done by the Dickie. I can't hear you, but you would know, maybe the Diamonds or something like that. Became a #1 hit. What typically happened so often was that these white bands would record tunes that were written by the black bands. Even I think Pat Boone recorded some songs like this and became big hits, which in fact the originals were so much better. But as the influence of these groups that we like so much, that's what that we copied. And we weren't the only bunch of young white high school kids in Charlotte or Charlotte area, probably all over the South, that copied these bands. And essentially our mentors, or those that we looked up to, which were just these black bands. And I should say a little bit about what Charlotte, or probably most of North Carolina, was like in that time in terms of racial segregation, and our school totally segregated, and the whole situation that way there was kind of a tension. Interestingly enough, music was probably the first area where integration came in, and people didn't think much about it. I know I used to teach a course in this, but in 1935, the first integrated band really was Benny Goodman's trio. Benny Goodman brought in Teddy Wilson, one of the great piano players, to play in his trio with Gene Krupa, and they were absolutely a fabulous group. But that was the first integrated group I knew of. And then Benny Goodman, who was Jewish, and he had experienced prejudice himself. But think about that, 1938, this is way before Jackie Robinson, way before anything that had to do with sports. Music was far more integrated. And it was the intersection of understanding of black music that was so much a part of black culture, that was inculcated or understood so much or felt by white musicians, that became what we all know and love as American music in every sort. I cannot, if you could come up with any example of American popular music that did not come from essentially this interaction between the black musicians and the black music with the rhythm and the white musicians, you'll have to tell me about it because I don't know. My total experience was that. The musicians that we most admired, of course, were the geniuses like Nat King Cole, but I would I actually got to see Ray Charles a few times, but Ray Charles was the epitome of the greatest of everything for all of us that we could see, go and see Ray Charles. I remember he had the first one had a Wurlitzer piano, and so as soon as we heard what I say, we went and bought a Wurlitzer piano. Now, when I played Little Darling before, I was going to say something about that. If you listen to the rhythm of Little Darling, okay, you said what's making that feel different, or what's making that more interesting? And what it is the syncopation. There again, it was another influence in American popular music, and that was the Latin feeling, the feeling of the rumba that became part of just the musical genre that we didn't know what we were doing, but we all felt it. And there again, that's music that came from the islands essentially, and that became calypso and rumba, and then later cha-cha and all those different musics like that. So just getting back to the fact that so much of our influence was from the Black musicians. I think the first piano player like that influenced me so much that I liked, we went to see him many times too. It was a guy named Huey Piano Smith. And Huey Piano Smith was a young guy who come from New Orleans and played that New Orleans style of Alan Toussaint and Professor Longhair. Let me play you a little bit of that. I always liked that New Orleans music. Huey would just, it was a very, the Huey P. Smith's band was just Huey on piano. They had two sax players, drummer, and bass. Very simple, but they would sing in the harmony, and the sax players would all dance together. Just really a good show. We tried to copy a lot of that kind of thing, and then I just really got kind of obsessed with that kind of music. And over the years, I learned a lot of the Professor Longhair and Huey Piano Smith. I'll play you one more about a little bit of a favorite. Well, I'll play you a little bit of two of them. One is about Professor Longhair called Tipatina. That gives you a little bit of the feeling of the type of music in New Orleans. When you add in the drummers from you got the horn players doing all their part, the bass players doing his thing. Then I don't know, it was just a lot of fun. Well, I'm spending probably way too much time on this. The time I got into Carolina, we put together the Rivieres back then again, and we by that time, we were doing a lot of other music that was popular at the time, particularly Motown music. I forgot to tell you one thing that I should mention. One of the greatest things about being in this business particularly I was thinking about all the different people I played with. I want to let you know how I got to know some of these people, but we got to play with people like Chuck Berry. We backed him up, and Jimmy Reed, who was a great classical or great Delta blues player. That was Jimmy Reed's kind of got me running, got me hiding. So anyway, they would book these bands into Park Center, this place that, and this is by the early 60s, middle 60s. People like Jimmy Reed, the Isley Brothers, the Impressions. It sounds like I'm dropping names somewhere there, but it's just the people that I played with, and this booking agent that booked our band a lot. Sometimes these guys would not have all their musicians, so they would want us to back them up. So that's how I got to play with Chuck Berry and played bass and keyboard with him, and there was Jimmy Reed when he was playing. And I got to know a wonderful guy named Curtis Mayfield, who had the Impressions, whether or not you know that music, but Curtis was a tremendous influence in American pop music. He wrote the great song with Jerry Butler, called He Don't Love You. And then, of course, his songs like It's All Right, and I'm the One Who Loves You, et cetera, et cetera. Later, he wrote some of the songs that Isaac Hayes and people wrote. But Curtis was a wonderful guy that got to know him and the other guys in his band. And that was a wonderful privilege back then as a young 15, 16-year-old kid in Charlotte to get to meet these wonderful guys. Put myself through Carolina with the band, with the Rivieras, and I appreciated what Jennifer said about Campus Crusade for Christ. I had worked with a group called Young Life, which is a wonderful interdenominational Christian group, and played the piano at the Young Life Ranches in Colorado. And when I was in Carolina, I worked with the Young Life and actually did a lot of studies in religion with Dr. Boyd and Dr. Hill. They put me up for a scholarship that I got to go to Duke. When Jan and I first got married, it was wonderful. I went to Duke Divinity School and I helped set up Young Life. A lot of you are familiar with what Young Life is here at Chapel Hill. My last year in Divinity School, I think the Lord wanted me to do something else. So I was playing music like I had played out at the Frontier Ranch in Colorado with Young Life, but had really gotten into Latin music. Music of Sergio Mendes, and way before that, I'd learned songs like "The Girl from Ipanema." Let me play you a little bit of that stuff. So I need a drummer or need the percussion to go along this, or a drum machine. So first group I had played a lot of this type of Latin music, was what I really liked. Sergio Mendes, the look of. That was really popular at the time, and plus the other kind of Brazilian music. And we were interested in doing that. So set up this band that they liked, and some fraternities liked us. Booking agent in Charlotte booked us in some groups like that. And so I started that group. I was going to call the New Latin Trio. And it lasted about one time. The agent in Charlotte said, I can't book anybody as the New Latin Trio. You're the Bill Bolen Trio. I said, I don't like that. I don't want to be cheating my name. And he said, no, you are. And so from then on, it became the Bill Bolen Trio. And they liked us. And so we would play everything from Stevie Wonder and all this classic beach music and music I was talking about before, and slowly evolved into being the band that I have today. But I had some wonderful guys that were part of my first band there. I'd have to say that some people say, how did you get into this and understand the business side of it? I was fortunate in growing up in Charlotte that I always had worked around country clubs, and was a member of the Myersport Country Club, grew up in that. And a lot of the parties and things the dances we played were at country clubs. So when I started a band being hired and playing at these clubs all over Eastern North Carolina, Virginia, and South Carolina, I was very familiar with it. I knew the kind of music that they liked, and particularly my age group. And I had grown up learning a lot of big band music and music that um, um, my parents was, my dad was a great lover of music. I was one of 7 kids, the third child, and for whatever reason, I just picked up music and liked it. And my brothers or sisters really did. And I stuck with taking lessons and all that stuff. So, but I did learn to play a lot of songs that my dad liked. And so I would say back in high school, I learned songs like Misty. It was one of the first ones I ever learned. Okay, I'll show off a little bit, but that's the kind of things that I learned then. And then actually, so at times on the weekends when we were doing Young Life weekends, the kids would want to hear different kind of music, and so we would play standards like that, like love songs, like Misty was one of the most popular ones, or Moon River, this kind of thing. After a lot of the younger people don't realize that the era that we grew up in, and I'm thinking about me and Roger Jennings and Dickie and Bill White or Dick Cashwell or whoever, anybody I could see out there on this, Dave Moreau. Music in the 40s, 50s, 60s, to me, it was a golden age of music because you had everything from popular rock and roll music in the beginnings, everything from Elvis Presley to Little Richard, and go on to lay the foundations kind of what became. But you also had like Henry Mancini and the music that we listened to it when we were watching TV shows, Peter Gunn, and the movie music was so wonderful. I think about the movie. It was just that, and then probably one of the big influences of all of us in the 60s was Burt Bacharach, who tried to change the whole harmony of music from being very simple chords to using more jazz chords and coming up with songs like with Dionne Warwick and Alfie, and just trying to think of how so many of the songs that were just very popular to us, but I listen to them now, they were very sophisticated. They incorporated kind of the harmonies of jazz and pop music. We ended up with just great music that was just part of our the things we listened to all the time. At Carolina, we were so fortunate. I was in the Beta fraternity, but we had a great tradition. It's called Germans. So the Germans Club had been, Dickie would probably know when it started, I guess in the 30s or 40s, because they had fabulous dances at the Tin Can. And we had wonderful dances too. One time, I want to say, we had Louis Armstrong, a group I used to back up, one called the Shirelles. Just wonderful music that was just part of our whole life experience at Carolina. Dionne Warwick, we had, I just started to think of all the different musical experiences that we had on Carolina campus. It just made it so rich. Anyway, getting back to the Bill Bolen band, I started, it's not a career. I decided this is what I was going to do. I thought originally I was going to go to law school and I was going to do these other things. I enjoyed teaching, so I taught music at the university. I taught percussion there first, and then went on to teaching private lessons. I look out there, it's not like the Cashwells, Mike Maxwell, his boys, and there's so many different kids that I got to know teaching over the years. I taught music for about 20, 30 years. was great fun for me. I have no idea what time it is, and Gavin, if I'm taking too long or whatever you got.
Bill, you're at 1:55.
Okay.
If you
Well,
yeah.
that the next thing I would say is that I ended up doing this, and one of the best things about it was getting to know so many wonderful people all over the state, and really in North Carolina, South Carolina. I was fortunate to go. I played down in Palm Beach and in the Jupiter Island Club. I got to be good friends of good people I knew up at Roaring Gap, which is a fabulous club up in the mountains that I've played there for over 40 years. And I've just been so fortunate and blessed to have met so many wonderful people and been part of my life. I played for over 1,000 weddings, so in Charlotte and Greensboro, all over. I have played for any number of bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs in Charlotte. I have so many close Jewish friends in Charlotte and Greensboro, particularly. I played so many Jewish parties in Charlotte, they thought I was Jewish. I could recite the Hamosim. But just what a privilege to know so many wonderful people and be part of this. I also had a fabulous 2 trips with a guy named Steve Bell, who Bob Slater worked with. I got to be the pianist on 2 different trips to Europe. We went to from Italy. We went to the Adriatic. I was the pianist on the Sea Cloud. Then the next time we went from Le Havre and did the French coast and on over to Spain and Lisbon. So I mean, I've just been incredibly blessed and fortunate. Now, the hard thing about this kind of business, of course, is working incessantly, particularly night times, having a totally different schedule than everybody else, but being blessed with having the most wonderful wife in the world who put up with me and understand that if I was going to make a go at this is what I had to do. You have to spend late nights driving back from gigs. You got to take care of equipment. You got to deal with musicians, all of these things. But I just feel so fortunate to be able to do that and meet so many different people through that. So thanks so much for listening to me. I feel like I've stammered around and.
Bill, this has been excellent, and I want to tell you, I want to personally thank you for agreeing to do this on such short notice. But I know the whole club wants to thank you for sharing your talents. This was just awesome. It was very special. We're gonna, in the interest of being respectful of your time and staying on time, I'm actually gonna pull my privilege in here and ask a question. It's kind of a comment and a question. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Laurie started us off with talking about the concept of nostalgia with regard to Chapel Hill, and music I find is something that is so tight. It just pulls on a lot of nostalgia. It ties very much in with, for me anyway, with nostalgia. When I hear something, I think back, and it really just conjures a lot of memories and emotions. One of the things that I have noticed as I've gotten older is I remember growing up, riding in the car, being with my parents and listening to music largely at the time that was already called oldies, but was from this era, from the 60s, mostly from the 60s. And not really, when you're a kid, anything that's not super contemporary just doesn't, there's almost this inherent rebellion against it, against what's new and what's pop and what's contemporary. And I had that attitude for sure. But what I started to notice as I got older is that I gravitated towards much of that music that I grew up listening that was nostalgic for my own parents, and has now, I'll tell you, become music that I enjoy and music that's nostalgic for me. My question is, do you think that was something special about the music? You mentioned the level of sophistication and complexity with many of much of this music at that time. You think there's something special or different about the music that allows it to have that success and appeal generationally, or is it mostly just the emotion and this nostalgia?
No. The music of that era was just it combined all of that. And you got to remember that there's been very little that I can tell that's this. I would say original is not the right word, but it's that different since the 50s, 60s, probably the 70s, the disco era. But I think that the music was so approachable in the 50s and 60s. I haven't even talked about country music. Gavin, I digress a minute. People a lot of times ask me, what's your favorite music? What do you like most? What do you play? All this. I kind of quote Duke Ellington on this. And Duke Ellington said, only two kinds of music, good music and bad music. And he was exactly right. I mean, I love a lot of country music, bluegrass, you name it. It's either good or it's either bad that way. And the music of the 50s and 60s, I think, went to the heart. It wasn't that complicated and wonderful melodies. And it was great dance music. You got to remember, all this music, for the most part, was to listen to, but it was to dance to. People moved when you listen to that music. And if you go back and watch the Supremes or watch the Four Tops or the Temptations, all these guys are moving. They were dancing. If you watch Ray Charles and the Raylettes, these shows were so exciting you wouldn't believe it if you were there live. So Jan's telling me the time. So I think it was a combination of that, but I think just the quality of the music there, which kind of set the standard for what came later. By the way, I tell you, again, you'll let me have to tell a real quick story. If you guys are interested, I did get to meet Duke Ellington. We played for him to start it one night, and Duke Ellington, I went back to the back, and the guy said, "Can I meet Duke Ellington?" I said, "Sure." And so I walked up to him and I said, "Duke Ellington, you're one of my favorite people, the greatest composer." And he looked around at me and he says, "What's your name?" And the guy said, "Oh, it's Bill Bolen." And Duke said, "Oh yeah, I heard of you." That's what we got. But then he went back and played a song for me. It touched me. It's one of these memories that you'd have. He sat down again and he says, "I'm going to play this song for my friend Bill Bolen." And he remembered that. And it's a song that Billy Strayhorn wrote called "Lotus Blossom." It just, what can you say? I mean, these different memories are so special. But we said Duke Ellington, just thought about that. But so thanks for listening. It was just I still remember some of these songs. I have been retired for 10 years, and so it's other than I play for the debutante ball because I just love the girls and the whole people associated with the Durham debutante ball. It's hard to believe that this is going to be, I think, my 39th or 40th year.
Wow.
Of doing that for the Durham Deb Ball. But it's a fabulous organization, wonderful people, all of that. And let me say one more thing, Gavin. Otherwise, you can get off if you want to.
No, you take your time, Bill. You're good.
Yeah. Well, I live in Chapel Hill. If I could show you, directly across the creek from me is where James Taylor grew up. And he's written songs about Copper Line and Carolina on My Mind and all this. And so I look over there, and guys, people who bought this, if left the 22 acres that is almost part of the Arboretum, are going to stay the same. So my biggest blessing in my life, I think Jen would say the same thing, is that we've gotten to live in Chapel Hill, be part of this fabulous community for the most of our lives. Now we love Charlotte too, but this is just the most wonderful place to live, and it had all these different associations. So thanks for listening.
Excellent. Well, this is really, really great. Bill, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, sharing your talents with us. I'm just humbled by the talent that is in this club, and I think that's just such a cool testament to it. So, Bill, thank you for doing that. I will formally dismiss everybody.